Hi everyone, welcome to Caribbean Tree Planting Week. My name is Tanima. I am part of the Caribbean Tree Planting Project. Last year, we set out to plant 1 million trees across the Caribbean. And although the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted our plans, we did it. We actually planted more than 1 million trees. I am super excited. Now we want to plant even more trees. You will hear all about it during our first ever Caribbean Tree Planting Week from July 5th to 11th. I am so glad you're able to join us today. So let's get started.
Thank you, Tanima. Welcome to the fourth online regional event of the Caribbean Tree Planting Week. I'm Rosalie Hamilton, and I'm chair of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, CariPhilAlliance for short. The Caribbean Tree Planting Week is organized by the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance and its partners from across the Caribbean and beyond, under the theme, Protecting Biodiversity and Cultural Heritage in the Caribbean. The objective of our week is to build public awareness of the importance of planting trees in our regions, to make sure that our region's environment and cultural heritage is in fact protected, and to reflect on how tree planting can contribute to achieving the range of global sustainability goals that we are challenged to meet. Now, this event focuses on the journey of the Baobab tree from Africa to the Caribbean. It not only achieves SDG 15, which is life on land, growing trees, and of course, climate change, SDG 13, but it also contributes to SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, and target 11.4 explicitly aims to protect the world's cultural and natural heritage. And we will learn today about the significance of the Baobab tree to the cultural heritage of the Caribbean. So for this reason, I am so pleased about the collaboration with the Natural History Museum of Jamaica in the Institute of Jamaica. And they are joining us in bringing this event to you. I'm excited about this event because we have a very awesome, knowledgeable presenter, Professor John Rashford, who will give us some amazing facts about this awesome tree. The tree is rooted in our culture and in the history of the Caribbean. And so for all the tree lovers and the tree huggers out there, you will enjoy this presentation. The depth of scholarly work, the richness of the information that he'll provide, and of course the synergy between trees and this particular tree and Caribbean cultural heritage. It will hold you captivated throughout the entire presentation, I promise you. And I made sure to dress the part with my African head wrap so that I can join Professor Rashford and everyone here on this journey to Africa and from Africa to the Caribbean. Now, before I start, I want to introduce you to Christy Stevenson. She is a Jamaican storyteller who recently created a story about the Baobab tree and its journey from Africa to the Caribbean. She did a very interesting visual story, and it was presented today at our signature cultural event that we organized and co-hosted in collaboration with the Clinton Global Initiative. Christy is here to introduce our distinguished presenter today, Professor John Rashford. Christy, tell us about Professor.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to introduce Professor Rashford, and he was born in the parish of Portland, Jamaica. He did his doctoral studies in anthropology at City University, New York, where he developed an interest in the relationship between people and plants. He has been an active member of the Society of Economic Botany, and he has been studying the history and cultural significance of the Baobab trees of the Americas for many, many years. Thank you.
Okay, I think you were breaking up a bit there, but John, it's over to you. Professor, you're here? All right, just come off mute.
Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. And thank you for the introduction, Christy. I must say that, I'm really happy to be making this presentation to you this afternoon because I've had a long-standing interest in the baobab, and it's important for me to give you some background. The focus of my talk is how the tree got from Africa to the Americas, but the context is very important. And this morning I started off, and I'm not going to repeat myself, but I'd like to briefly recapitulate the main point I was making. I encountered the baobab in my travels in Africa when I was a student, mostly in East Africa and later on in Western Africa. But I really didn't become fundamentally interested until I came in contact with the tree in Antigua. My cousins were taking me around to look at cotton trees, and I ended up at baobab trees instead. It turned out it was difficult for them to distinguish these two trees. But what stuck in my mind was an old lady whose house is quite close to the tree, and a wall, cut stone wall was in front of the tree, and you could see it was demolishing the wall. I asked her if she wasn't worried about her house, and she made it clear that the wall was not important, the house was not important, that the tree was really what was important to her. And it really started me thinking about the history and introduction of this tree to the Caribbean. I had not read anything about it before, and only when I began looking into it, I realized that botanists have mentioned it in floristic studies, but very few details about what the tree meant to people. And I decided that I'd start to document them wherever I found them. And in the end, I began actually looking out for them. It's not a difficult thing to do because unlike guinea trees and mangoes and akis and the like, this is not a weeded tree. It doesn't spread freely and massively on its own. And I quickly learned that behind every baobab tree was really a human story about what the tree meant to someone or some group, not only for their reasons for planting it, but also their reasons for protecting it. Now, there are a number of, I would call them fanciful accounts of the origin of the baobab in the Caribbean. You know, some have said it was brought by birds, and some have theorized that maybe it came with pre-Columbian African colonists. Some suggest it came on ocean currents and was beached on the Caribbean islands. I think the most plausible explanation, and the one that corresponds best to the kinds of evidence I've collected, is that it really came with Africans during the plantation period. And to make this judgment, I decided to measure the trees as I came across them. I measured the girth because I wanted to know how big they were relative to what we know about the tree elsewhere. Now, the largest baobab trees in Africa get up to 120 feet in circumference, and I refer to those as ancient baobabs. Old baobab trees get between 50 and 66 feet in circumference, and these are the largest ones we find in the Caribbean. And then there are those that I refer to as medium-sized trees next, and then young trees. Well, I have never seen any ancient baobabs in the Caribbean, and the ones described as ancient in Africa are known to be 1,000 years or older. And I might add that as an aside, quite a number of these ancient trees have died in recent years, many believe because of climate change. You can check it out on Google's. Now, so the largest baobabs in the Caribbean then are old trees. And because I'd measured the circumference, I was able to see where the oldest trees occur based on the extent of their survey I've done so far. Now, girth is not an absolute measure of age. It's a relative measure, and it only has value if you include with it historical documentation and the like. So these sizes that I'm mentioning to you are relatively, they're useful in a relative sense, not in an absolute sense. Now, the largest baobabs I discovered were in Brazil. And I know we're talking about the introduction and spread of the baobab in the Caribbean, but historically, it's not possible to separate Brazil from the Caribbean because we're talking about the history of slave plantations producing sugar. And Brazil is very much part of the history of the people, African peoples in the Americas, the link between Brazil and the Caribbean, and also I might add the southern United States. Now, in Brazil, the oldest trees I've found are, for example, in Rio Grande do Norte, in Natal. There's a magnificent tree there that was threatened with destruction, and a distinguished Brazilian lawyer purchased the land in order to save the tree. Diogenes da Cunha Lima is his name. And today that tree is referred to as the Baobab of the poet, and he's known as the poet of the Baobab, an immense tree, certainly one of the largest on the coast of Brazil. In the northeastern part of Brazil, where sugar industry was most concentrated, there's a very large trees in Recife, and I hope later on I can show you one or two of those pictures. Now, the connection to the Caribbean is not just the fact of sugar and of an African workforce, but the baobab, the next oldest baobabs turn up in the Caribbean, and it's not surprising that they turn up in Barbados, because after the Portuguese had started the cultivation of sugar in Brazil based on African labor, it began with Native American labor and then shifted to African labor. And after that period, especially after the Dutch effort to seize Brazil failed, the sugar industry expanded to Barbados. And it's not surprising that one of the largest baobab trees in the Americas today is in Barbados. That tree is one of the best documented we have because it was described in the early literature when it was about some 12 years old. In the description, the author was not certain as to its identity. This is the Reverend Griffith Hughes, but he gave a good enough description for us to be certain that he was describing the baobab tree at Warren. And other islands with such sizable trees include the St. Croix. St. Croix has a wonderful baobab population with very large baobabs, especially in Golden Grove, where there's a very magnificent tree there. It's interesting that in Barbados, people are very familiar with the tree at Warren and the one in Queen's Park, Savannah. These are certainly examples of the oldest baobabs you will find in the Americas. But it's important to remember that this is a living tradition in the Caribbean and in Brazil, and people continue to plant the tree. So in Brazil, in Barbados, I've already recorded some 33 trees, baobab trees in Barbados, and quite a large number in Brazil, not as many in Jamaica, and surprisingly, all the old trees that I recorded beginning in the 1980s, none of them have survived down to the present. When I first began this project, I thought that baobab trees, since they can live over 1,000 years, that the trees I would be recording would be around for a very long time. You can imagine my surprise to find that none of these trees, in fact, have survived. If you went to Jamaica today and you wanted to look at baobab trees, you would be convinced that the only trees that exist there are fairly young trees, and that would be incorrect. Now, the baobab trees in Barbados and in Brazil were present in these places before the development of scientific botany. So the tree was not known in Europe at the time it was dispersed in Barbados and in Brazil. And the same is true for Jamaica. In fact, Edward Long is a great historian of Jamaica, and he described baobab trees in what was the capital at the time, Spanish Town. In the third volume of his classic work on the history of Jamaica, he mentions a baobab tree in the island of St. Vincent in the Botanical Gardens. And yet he didn't realize that he was talking about the same tree in Spanish Town and the one in the Botanic Garden in St. Vincent. The fact is, the tree didn't become known to the people of Europe until the mid-1700s. It's named after the distinguished French botanist, Michel Adanson, who discovered it while exploring in Senegal. He traveled from Dakar up to Saint Louis and wrote about the natural history of Senegal. And it was his description of the tree that led Linnaeus to incorporate it into his species Plantarum. So by the time the tree becomes known to the people of Europe in the mid-1800s, it's another 10, 15 years before that specific historical event has an influence on the Caribbean. Because we learn from Miller, famous for his Dictionary of Gardening, that the gardeners in England had acquired seed from Paris, and that the seeds came from Michel Adanson, and that they germinated the seeds and sent them to the Caribbean. Now, it's quite possible that the seeds that were planted in Jamaica by the Jamaican planters at the time, especially Hinton East and his garden, and the ones planted in St. Vincent came from these trees that ultimately can be traced back to Michel Adanson and his exploration in Western Africa. But it's a mistake to assume that all the baobabs we encounter in the Caribbean have a single point of introduction or a single trajectory of introduction. From what I can tell, the trees being introduced has been introduced fairly continuously. And in that context, I would like to just expand my discussion by saying that the same continues in other parts of the world as well. Now, the reason I started off my talk by mentioning my experience in Africa is because you must ask yourself this question: why would people bring this tree to the Americas? And my response is that it is probably Africa's most important tree, both economically and inspirationally. It's valued in every respect. The leaves are edible, they're widely eaten in West Africa. The fruit is probably one of Africa's best known fruit. It's one of Africa's most important cosmic tree. Many of you might not readily understand what I mean by cosmic tree, but it's simply the idea that in the early religions of people around the world, they adopted the tree as the way in which they modeled the cosmos. So from a traditional point of view, we live in a tree modeled world. The upper branches of the sky, the trunk, the connecting portion, and the root, the earth itself. So these cosmic ideas are widespread in association with baobab and are part of the importance of its significance to people in Africa as both a tree of practical value and inspirational value. So when you think about it from that point of view, it's important to realize that this tree has been associated with human beings probably over the course of our evolutionary history. And this morning I ended my comments when I was making a comparison to measuring the speed of light, because basically what I wanted to say is today people seem to have no trouble when we talk about distances according to how far light travels in a second. And yet human history is only about 7 million years. And well over 95% of that history occurred in Africa. we are ultimately an African species. All people trace back ultimately to Africa. And this is not my idea. It's not a political idea. This has been the view in the scientific community for a very, very long time. And the spread of modern human beings out of Africa is only within the last 150,000 years. I'm talking about anatomically modern human beings like ourselves. And the origins of agriculture only develops worldwide about 12,000 years ago. And what we call civilization that developed among the Mayas and the Aztecs and the Incas and in Mesopotamia and the Nile Valley and in the Indus and across in Asia and great rivers of China, a mere 7,000 to 8,000 years at the most. And in this 78,000 years, this has probably been one of Africa's most important cultivated plants, though for reasons that I can't explain now, it is not often properly understood as such. Now, I gave you this background because I want to say that this is a tree of importance to all people, not by my judgment, but by my observation. As I said this morning, it has spread to India, where it is widespread, from Western India all the way across to Eastern India, Gujarat south along the coast, in the state of Tamil Nadu and into Sri Lanka, large population there. And in all of these places, it attracts human attention. It attracts the efforts of people to preserve it. And as I said earlier, it seems to be spread primarily by people. I haven't been able to document that this is a weedy tree that we should expect to find generated on its own. In Africa, it does generate on its own because when people use the fruit a lot, and especially if they don't eat the seeds, they simply dispose of it in their refuge pile, and it germinates and they transplant it to the places where they would like to have it grow, or if it's grown in a useful place, they'll protect it in place. And for this reason, it's often said it's not cultivated. But the truth is, I suspect this is a tree that's been spread intentionally by people and is being cultivated by people wherever it grows. So I can say from my own field work, the tree is highly revered wherever it appears. I've witnessed it and documented it in Japan. I've seen it in my research in India, certainly in the Caribbean and in Brazil. It's a very sacred tree to people in Brazil, and you can find it planted in their terreiros. It is not as common as I had thought initially when I went to Brazil, but since the time of my research, they've been able to get seeds and they have engaged in a lively tree planting of baobabs in their community. So the introduction of the baobab to the Caribbean then is because it is a multi-purpose tree, because it is valuable both economically and inspirationally to people, and because it is of iconic importance. This is the tree that more than any other is iconic of the African continent, of the savanna landscape of our evolutionary history, and of the diverse peoples of Africa. But it deserves to be recognized as a tree of life for all human beings in light of its possible significance in our long evolutionary history as an African species. The last thing I would like to say in my brief comment, because I'd like to leave some time, I'm sure people might have questions they would like to ask. The baobab, I think, is a good tree for tree planting in the Caribbean, not just because of its iconic background and its relevance to people around the world, its rich association with our past as human beings, but it is also, as far as I'm concerned, a practical tree in that respect. It produces fruit throughout the dry time of the year from about mid-autumn through the spring. and each tree produces large numbers of fruit with a nutritious edible pulp and edible seeds. Now, what makes a tree remarkable is not only that you can eat the leaves, the fruit, and the seeds, but that they are naturally storable. It's a dry fruit, so when it ripens, it becomes completely dry, unlike a tamarind that's still moist on the inside. The baobab becomes completely dry and can be stored in its natural state for a very long period of time. It's also common for people in Africa to dry the leaves and to store them for use when the tree's out of leaves, which it usually is during the dry time of the year. A third reason for planting this tree is that one of the reasons it's called a tree of life is because its association with an extraordinary diversity of living things. This is particularly true of birds and of a variety of arthropods, insects in particular, the most famous being bees. Honey has been the nectar of human beings for a very long time, and bees are known for routinely nesting in baobab trees. The Hasta people of Tanzania, the baobab tree is their honey tree. And it's not just that they get honey from the tree, but they live together with a bird called the honey guide. And this bird actually will make a ruckus and guide them to beehives and honey trees from which they're able to obtain large quantities of their favorite honey. So our relationship to the tree is our relationship to a landscape, to an ecology that includes bees, birds, a great variety of mammals and reptiles that live in the hollow trunk of the tree. It invariably becomes hollow as it matures. And so it's not surprising to find bees and a variety of other animals that would inhabit the tree. So from a biodiversity point of view, it is a very useful tree in the long run. Finally, because it is long-lived, it is a tree that will be around for a long time and connect the memories of past, present, and future. I'm always astonished when I'm in Barbados or in St. Croix or any place where I find an old baobab tree dating back 200-300 years, that this tree has been around for a very long time and has seen quite a bit of history. It's nice to know that you're planting something that will persist and will have meaning and will facilitate the continuity of meaning through time. Now, I'd like to leave some time, as I said, if you have questions you'd like to ask. I hope I've been able to shed some light on this remarkable tree that is revered by people wherever it goes, even young people. I leave you with one last anecdote. In Natal, in Brazil, I was measuring and photographing an old tree that had an enormous hole in the trunk of it. And, you know, for those of you who are interested in the details, the baobab is associated with fertility. It has breast-like fruits. It flowers at night. The flowers hang upside down rather than turn to the light. It has a pregnant shape. It has a vaginal-like cavity at its base. So it's not surprising that people around the world, particularly in Africa, are associated with fertility. So I'm measuring and photographing the tree, and there are a group of young children standing around. So afterwards, as is customary, I went to interview them. I was always curious about people who were watching or, you know, lived in proximity to the tree. They told me that they were responsible for the tree and that they're the ones that had put up the sign about not harassing the bats that lived inside the tree, and that they were watching me because they wanted to know what my interest is and what I was doing. And that has been my experience throughout my research. This is a tree that clearly commands the attention of people. And if it survives because of the interest people have in protecting it. With that, I think I will stop. And I would like to thank everyone involved for the invitation to make this brief presentation to you. I started this work about 40 years ago, and at the time, baobabs were a very esoteric subject. I'm amazed at the amount of attention that the tree has garnered in recent years from movies and documentaries and theme parks and the like. But most of all, I'm quite impressed with the enthusiasm I witnessed this morning from young people interested in tree planting and the Caribbean environment. And who can be interested in tree planting in the Caribbean environment who is not interested in a global initiative at tree planting and global climate? So I applaud the everyone involved in the organization of this wonderful event, and I express my appreciation for the invitation to come and share some of my work with you. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I have a couple of questions while I'm having a little conversation with you. I encourage those who are online on Facebook to send in your questions if you have any questions for Prof. Prof, there's a confusion between the baobab tree and the cotton tree. We call it duppy tree in Jamaica. Is there a relationship?
Yes, there is. They're both, closely related Bombax group, and both are sacred to people in West Africa. And in the Caribbean, because I think baobab tree were not as, they didn't spring up as readily as cotton trees do. I think cotton trees became more favored in the imagination, or at least more well known for its spiritual association. But in fact, all the trees of spiritual importance to people in Africa are of spiritual importance to people in the Caribbean, in India, all over the world. The most important group of sacred trees, as far as I'm concerned, come from the genus Ficus. They're figs. Whether we're talking about the figs of the Bible or the Ficus sycamoris that lines the great rivers of Africa, or the figs of India under which a Buddha was enlightened, the Ficus religiosa, for example, or the figs in the southern archipelago of Japan, or those of the people of the Pacific, or even of Mesoamerican civilization. So by far, one of the most sacred groups of trees to human beings are figs. And in Jamaica, we call figs God tree for the same reason that the people in Brazil consider them to be sacred, because they descend from heaven to earth. And anything that comes from heaven to earth, we give the prefix God. God tree, God bush, God okra. The fig starts as a little epiphyte, sends down roots to the ground, and then slowly strangles its host and takes its place. So like the baobab, these figs are extraordinary. The cotton tree is extraordinary for its size and magnificent, and the baobab. So all three trees, I would say, are of fundamental importance in the cultural tradition of the people of Africa and of the Caribbean. It's just that, we are most familiar with the cotton tree. And if I might just add one other comment, Rosalie, one of the reasons we're so familiar with the cotton tree is that it became associated with resistance in Jamaica. And all forms of religious activity associated with the cotton tree was considered seditious activity. And so people were being arrested and, their religious objects destroyed, much as we know is the history in Brazil and other places as well. Even to this day, if you mention certain topics of Caribbean people, occasionally I see a slight squirm, but my point is, these are all sacred trees. And the question you're asking is a good one, because they're not only related biologically, they're all deeply intertwined in our history and culture.
Would you say that part of the reason we don't have them here in Jamaica, they're all cut down, is it the association with Africa, or is it that the size of the tree and its contestation with urban development?
Well, I don't know if I'd say they're all cut down, but I have to yield to you because you're inside.
well, they're no longer here. Let me put it that way.
No, I suspect they're probably not as common as they were, because, the large ones were cut down for canoes, and I actually documented that in Portland. And cotton trees too do require some care for their regeneration. And our numbers in the Caribbean has increased, and we've put pressure in the environment in terms of human needs. And so I wouldn't be surprised that, along with cotton trees and baobabs, and this is why I tell what I consider, I don't call it a sad story because I'm not a baobab romantic. I hope everyone understands it. I have an interest in the tree because of its importance in a number of respects. But when I mention what happened in Jamaica, I'm more surprised than anything else that none of the large trees have survived. And in every case, it has to do with pressure from human interests. And I'll give you one example, since it's germane to the point you raised. At the Alpha Academy School in Jamaica, there was a large baobab growing in the boys section of the school. And when I got there, if you look at the article I wrote is accessible on the internet. If you look at the picture, the branches underneath it, many of the large branches had been cut. And when I asked the school, the sisters, why the branches were cut, they said they were cut to present the zinc roof in the, I think it was a print shop or something. I don't remember off the top of my head. And I remember saying to her, if you had put up a sign outside, you probably would have got enough money to build a whole new print shop. Unfortunately, the tree did not survive. But I'm telling you this not because I think it's any malintent or anything like that. I'm simply saying, if the tree is old, it's because we have been taking care of it. That's the only reason why. And it gets more and more difficult as time goes by because of the increase in demands that we put on the environment. And also because I don't think trees have been a central part of our self-education myself, being a tree tracker myself. And I say that because, it's been pretty lonesome being a tree tracker, or maybe I should say it used to be pretty lonesome being a tree tracker. But it's nice to have met the community this morning of people who show such enthusiasm and concern and insight and desire to move forward with the importance of trees in our environment and cultural and social history.
Okay, so we have Karen Campbell here. He's a botanist from the Natural History Museum of Jamaica in the Institute of Jamaica. So I know he has a few words, and perhaps if there are any other questions or comments, let me hand over to Karen. Karen, you're on mute. Oh.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Karen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Campbell, a botanist at the Natural History Museum of Jamaica, division of the Institute of Jamaica.
We're getting some feedback, Karen.
Okay.
Not sure what's happening there.
That sounds better now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm the botanist at the Natural History Museum of Jamaica, which is a division of the Institute of Jamaica and an agency of the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport. So let me start out by thanking Professor John Rashford for a most informative, engaging, and interesting presentation on the baobab tree. I'd also like to thank Prof. Hamilton, who just called me in, and the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance team and its many partners across the region for organizing the Caribbean Tree Planting Week. Thank you, Christy Stevenson and Daniel Thompson, and all involved in organizing this specific event, the Lasco Chin Foundation, the audience on Zoom and Facebook. Thank you for taking the time out to come and listen, participate, and glean from Professor Rashford's presentation. The presentation brings light to the importance of trees and how they have played a role in our development, whether from a research perspective, or economic, cultural, religious, or other perspectives. And it brings bear to the point that trees present here in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean all have a story to tell. And we heard one story today from Prof. Rashford. Even more significant about this presentation is its importance and the connection that this tree has with African peoples of Africa, and importance to life, and on so many levels. As the African proverb states, wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. And today, Prof. Rashford truly gave us some wisdom, speaking about the same tree which the proverb speaks to. And he has enlightened us and engaged us in a way that we ourselves can now, form some interest in other trees found here in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, and to seek information about these trees to see how important they are, where they're from, why are they here, who brought them here, and so on. And in part, based on what we're doing here this week in terms of the tree planting week, we can prioritize in some way which species we want to plant, species that connect us to our ancestors, species that are, for economic reasons, species that feed us, different perspectives we can look at. And so again, thank you, Prof. Through your presentations and your many publications prior to this presentation you gave to us, you have basically opened our appetite to seek more information. And it's a wealth of information out there, and this presentation, as pointed out, is just one of the tasters, which hopefully we will have other presentations similar to this in the future, to bring us back home and give us valuable information about trees across the region, whether they be introduced or whether they be native trees. They all have a story to tell. With that, I can only say, wow, thanks for the wealth of knowledge again. And I would like to introduce Daniel Thompson, who will be giving a rallying call. So over to you, Daniel.
Greetings, entire community of tree lovers, tree huggers, and tree enthusiasts. We're here today just soaking up all the knowledge, all the wisdom. Prof. Rashford, I must say, it is indeed our honor to have you on. And as the next generation, you have laid that solid foundation of fact, not fiction, but actuality for us to track our roots and our journey as a human species throughout this entire world. And to see the metaphor of the tree being brought into this inaugural event of a Caribbean tree planting week is truly special. And we deeply thank you for that. Based on what you have said, it would be remiss of me to not, bring some highlights from comments that were made. I'm sure persons are really curious about, the possibility of other closely related species that are present in the Caribbean right here today. We saw some questions running in the commentary. I'm not sure if you can touch on that a little bit. Oh, you're on mute, Prof. Thanks.
Oh. I haven't actually been able to look at the chat or the comments.
Oh, that's fine.
You'd have to tell me and I'll respond.
Okay, fantastic. So we had a question about, relatives of this majestic tree that would be, in the Caribbean or you would have seen in your travels.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the evolutionary part of my talk, because I'm serious. I am serious about that. And when you ask about that, that's why I mentioned about the honey guide bird.
Right.
Here's a bird that has evolved that has a co-evolving relationship with human beings, that it will guide people to beehives in order to get the beeswax, which is its primary or preferred food.
Right.
So um, um, phrase your question again, because I'm so distracted by what I was saying to you. Ask your question again.
Oh, no problem at all. The closest living relatives that are of the tree that may be present in the Caribbean, if you've bucked up these particular,
Okay.
relatives.
Okay. The one I was going to mention is not a close relative, but is closely identified with it, and is
Okay.
also one of the great trees of Africa, and this is the tamarind.
The
Definitely
tamarind.
where they're being planted. If you are at all in Barbados and Virgin Islands and Jamaica, you see ancient tamarind trees, long-lived, durable, highly nutritious, fruitful, and deeply rich in history. Now, the connection to baobabs, wherever baobabs grow, it's always called a kind of tamarind. So in India, it's called Brahma tamarind.
That's cool.
It's called, and we do the same thing in the Caribbean. So in Barbados, it's flower tamarind. In Jamaica, it's monkey tamarind. In St. Croix, and it's Guinea tamarind. So I wondered to myself, are we just calling it tamarind superficially because of the taste of the fruit? It has to be more than superficial to occur all across India, because the baobab is called a kind of tamarind all over India. And Brahma tamarind, Shiva tamarind, you understand, with the most sacred people of India. And in the Caribbean, we're calling it a tamarind. And the reason is that these two trees not only grow in the same environment, they're often found growing intertwined, side by side. And I've seen it in the Caribbean and written about it. So they're not only intertwined in the environment, they're intertwined in our imagination and in our food habits, because the tamarind is substitutable in some cuisine for baobabs and vice versa.
Wow.
So what I'm talking about ultimately, because, as a young person, what I would say to you is this: all human beings around the world create a settlement vegetation. You might not have heard that term. I am emphasizing it because what I'm saying is that as human beings, wherever we live, we must create a settlement of some kind that impacts the plants around us. And that vegetation reflects the history and culture of the people involved. And so if we were in Japan, we would be looking at their shrines and the great sugi and hinoki evergreen trees. You go to their theater, and in the background is a giant pine tree, for example, symbol of good luck, et cetera, et cetera. It's deeply interwoven in their sense of, but this is the same for everyone, right? So I'm simply saying that we have our own settlement vegetation as Caribbean people. And ours is in some ways unique because it was formed at a time when the modern world was coming into existence. The Caribbean is at the foundation of the making of our modern world. The scientific revolution in the 1600s occurred when the Portuguese were developing the slave plantation. The Enlightenment in Europe and the emphasis on reason and freedom occurred during the 1700s when the plantation system was at its height. And what I'm saying is we are in the Caribbean fortunate because all during this period, plants were the source of global economic wealth. And they were brought to the Caribbean from every single region of the world because they were at that time the source of imperial wealth and influence in the world. This was the reason for the great expansion. The Portuguese around the Horn of Africa looking for spices. It was the reason for Columbus stumbling across the Americas and assuming he had reached India. They were looking for spices, they were looking for plants, and they were looking for people to grow these crops and to raise them and to ship them and so on. And so it is not just a story of Africa. Native Americans have suffered immensely from removal from their ancestral territories and the early development of plantation slavery. And this is not a short history. This is a long, brutal, vicious history. And I'm not, as I said many times, I'm not a romantic type of person. I really am interested in the world for what it is. But what I am saying to you is that we have, as Caribbean people, a very rich botanical history that is at the core of our freedom. And what I say to you that I did not say to Rosalie is that you mentioned the word obeah to Caribbean people and they immediately go into fits. But why was this religion so horrible that it was made a crime by our enemies?
That's a good question,
to ask, right? Why do we see ourselves as bush people?
Why?
And why after emancipation did they find it necessary to go and cut down our fruit trees? They said that they did it because otherwise we wouldn't work. They said that the bush around us provided us everything we need. We just have to look up and we had coconuts. And so the only way they could save us from our own laziness and idleness was to remove the obstacles in our way by cutting down our fruit trees. So
the irony of that.
You understand? We have a long, rich history with a unique settlement vegetation that is distinctive to who we are and the development of our way of life. And that's what I'm talking about.
That is absolutely powerful, Prof. Being able to track it in that way and to see the relationship between our native vegetation, the ones that came with the people who came, that were truly a melting pot of different cultures, and what is sacred here we may take for granted, but that is truly our inheritance. That is our truth.
Right.
That is our truth.
And to show you the irony of life, I was invited to be one of the science advisors for the National Tropical Botanical Garden in Hawaii. I consider it one of the distinct honors in my life. It's a wonderful garden. More than that, it's an extraordinarily wonderful community. So you can imagine what a delight it is to be back in the home of the breadfruit.
Yes.
And not only am I back in the home of the breadfruit, but the National Tropical Botanical Garden. And I take a moment to credit the remarkable work of Dr. Diane Ragoni, who has spent the bulk of her scientific career involved in assembling varieties of breadfruit from throughout the Pacific. So on the island of Maui, for example, there are over 200 different varieties of breadfruit, both for scientific study, for conservation, and to make them available. In Trees That Feed here in the Caribbean, we have our own Caribbean people actively involved in support of that initiative and ensuring that, we continue to have varieties, et cetera, et cetera. Now, isn't it ironic that I should head the chair of the Breadfruit Committee of the National Tropical Botanical Garden? How ironic is that?
Perfectly timed.
And the breadfruit was introduced to Jamaica in 1793, I think it was. The same time that they took the Ackies from Jamaica to England, where it was formally described and classified by Linnaeus. So every plant, every landscape, every gardener is a fundamental bedrock of our history as a distinct community in the world. And I would like to see us be aware of that and know that and understand. So when after emancipation, people planted trees because they wanted to be independent of the plantation system. Trees were emblematic of freedom. It was emblematic of a way of life that allowed us to live outside of the framework of exploitative exploitation. So trees are at the very core. When I did my dissertation, there was a wonderful man, and he was unique in the community I studied. And he was unique because he planted a tree, even though he was a tenant farmer. And it was said, tenants don't plant tree on rented land because you're not going to live to see the fruit. So I remember asking him one time, why do you plant trees on rented land? Because he was famous for planting trees, especially pimento, which had a good economic value. And, he would say once a tree reached a certain height, the estate would say you can't reap the crop because it's their tree. And so people would cut them down when they spring up in their fields, but he would allow them to grow. So I said, well, why you allow them to grow? He said, no for me and you eat them and no me and you plant it.
Exactly.
Right? You have to plant for every little thing. The birds, that was his philosophy. Utterly generous. And that's a legacy that these trees represent for us in the Caribbean.
We should learn from that generosity, and I can firmly say that we believe you are very generous with your time, with your information, and with your years of research, because this is what it's all about, and this is exactly what the Caribbean Tree Planting Project is about. It's about community, it's about roots, it's about planting seeds for the next generation. Even if we never sit under a tree at a certain height and reap the fruit at a certain time in our lives, we know that we have done the work, and we invite everyone to plant with us. And planting is one part, sustaining is another. And as trees sustain us, it's also our responsibility, as you had emphasized many times during this wonderful presentation, that when human beings take the interest, trees survive. And without the tree surviving, our entire ecosystem has been not only disrupted, but can crumble. And we will not just lose the value of the trees, but the value of the stories, the value of our history and of our freedom. So it is imperative for us to all not just soak up the knowledge, internalize it, but to become interested in the ground, in the earth, in the plants that will grow well, where they can grow, the stories that are held within the trees, and then to take the responsibility to create food, fruits, lumber, help for the wild pollinators, because it's all one system. It's literally all one ecosystem, and we are, a part of that. And I mean, I can't thank you enough for the information that you have given to us today. I know the tip of the iceberg. We could literally listen to you for hours, and we're hoping to be able to engage with you again as we plant not only baobab trees, but other trees. I know you have studied very widely, and we can't thank you enough for that. And we know that you have a book that will be coming out soon. We're very excited to hear a little bit about when that will be out.
Well, I'm hoping it will be out next year. It's written and it's going through the review process. And the title of it is The Baobab as Humanity's Tree of Life. So you've heard a little bit about it already.
We've gotten a sweet little taste, but there's much more to come.
But I hope you understand that, I've enjoyed studying the tree, but I'm really delighted to discover the wonderful work that you all engage. It's so nice to see this aspect of Caribbean life and culture come to life after 40 years, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I look forward to contributing in any way that I can.
And it is our honor. Right now, we'll just take the opportunity to invite every person on this live to share. This live will be available after, and we will let you know how you can get in contact with Professor Rashford, because he has a lot of information to share. And we're seeing in the chat, Prof, a lot of different questions about the myths and where you've discovered the trees and where people can go and see them. So the tree huggers are going to go hugging after this. And we have an open letter that we have in the links in the chat and on our website, on our Instagram, Caribbean Tree Planting Project. Click the link, sign the open letter, guys. We want to make this week official. We want to be able to bring back Prof every year. We want to be able to bring back the work we do every year. We plant together. We've already surpassed our 1 million goal. We're going past that again, 3 million for 2023. So plant with us. You are the arms, you are the hands, you are the eyes of Mother Nature. We have 2 thumbs, so we have a lot of responsibility to plant, to take an interest, and to get the work done. We have over 22 countries planting, and the more people on board, the more humans on board, is the more that our natural environment will thrive, the more that we'll be able to leave a lasting impact. So we have an open letter for you to sign, read through, get our heads of state on board. We also have tree shirts with the Baobab featured right up front and center. Prof, you'd really like them. They're gorgeous, different sizes and colors, and each tree shirt, has been, totally commissioned to be able to allow planting ambassadors to continue the good work across the Caribbean. So you will be contributing, and you see the open letter in the chat. So as you purchase a shirt, you can have your personal logo for your company on it, and it contributes to the planting of trees, because we have to get the work done together, and we're doing it as a community from the inside, and our community will grow. You can also join us as tree planting ambassadors. When you go on the website, you sign up to be an ambassador, you get on board, and we support you in your projects as you enter into the community. So there are many ways to be involved, and we're really excited. On the screen now, you will see different sizes, different colors. Alba from Denmark, they source the cotton sustainably. So every aspect of this shirt has been mindful of Mother Nature. Sustainable cotton, equal pay for the persons who constructed it, and it goes straight towards the planting of trees. So we're really excited to be able to share more of what's going on in the Caribbean. We have a lot more exciting things happening later this week. You're going to see in the live all the different activities from yesterday the 5th going straight back to the 11th. And next year, you'll be a part of it in even a more integral way, presenting the work that you have done throughout the year. So plant with us, sign the letter, get involved. This live will be made available, and we look forward to planting with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Danielle. And of course, we're going to leave out with our Plant Your Tree song. Plant enough tree.
Financial meltdown. That's what I'm saying. Money over food, for real. Every day we are store up vanity, yet there's a crisis on the rise. One way to preserve humanity, it's time we realize intellectualities and technologies will surely go to waste. Got to think about survival. Let's do this in a haste. Plant some trees. Food crisis on the horizon. Plant some seeds. Plant it in and out of season. Plant some trees. It's time to start the mission. Plant some seeds. Whoa, yo, 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 yo. Politicians don't have the answer. We change them every time. Even though we make the change, things remain the same. We did tell us the truth. IMF is not the solution. We did tell us the truth. We need this revolution. We did tell us the truth. We control our destiny. The only solution is production and the science of self-reliance. Plant some trees. Food crisis on the horizon. Plant some seeds. Got to plant them out of season. Plant some trees. It's time to start the mission. Plant some seeds. Plant it in and out of season. Global financial meltdown put the whole world in a spin. These great financial wizards couldn't see this coming. Now we know the truth, got to take it to the root. Now we know the truth, we got to grow the fruit. Now we know the truth, this wealth won't get us back. As the rain fall from the sky, without the food you die. Plant some trees. Food crisis on the horizon. Plant some seeds. Plant them in and out of season. Plant some trees. Food crisis crisis on the horizon. Plant some seeds, plant them in and out of season. Plant some trees, food crisis on the horizon. Plant some seeds, plant it in and out of season. Plant some trees, got to plant some trees. Plant some trees, some seeds. Plant.
Nice, nice, nice. Thank you. Next time, next show.